Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's going good. We've been hitting on all cylinders for months now. You know, whether it's Hyundai, whether it's Fresh Supply Co. and MasterCard. We also got that huge news from Drop that came out. But just the past couple weeks have been huge as well. You know, we had the proof of reserve system that was announced by one of our council members, WorldPay, and that's going to be really important for our stablecoin ecosystem. And then just last week, we had another one of our council members, ServiceNow, who is launching an app that's going to be really important for our refi ecosystem. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And then this week we have Alcott, again, bringing a really important thing to our refi ecosystem, in this case, supply. But before we get to that top story, I do want to congratulate Calaxy. Of course, Calaxy is our social media platform that's completely built on top of Hedera, pretty much doing what Elon wants to do with X, but they're doing it today. And they were highlighted on the crypto show for CNBC. One of my goals for Hedera is for them to be mentioned on the flagship show. Pretty much everybody in the financial ecosystem watches that show. So I want to see that. This show is mainly overseas, and then you can, of course, catch it on the internet as well. But Solo, the CEO of Calaxy, did a fantastic job representing not only Calaxy, but Hedera and the DLT ecosystem as a whole. So congratulations to Solo. And with that, I want to get to our top story, and that is the Alcott news. I don't want to ruin it because Rob did a fantastic job in Shark Bites. I'm going to split Shark Bites up because he had some really good insights on this Alcott news, and this is what he had to say when I asked him about it.
So this is one of those undersold but absolutely massive announcements for the Hedera ecosystem. And it's testament, as usual, to Wes and the Sustainable Impact Fund team in a very long process of relationship building and working with Alcott and working on the incentive models for integrating Alcott into the Guardian ecosystem. So who are Alcott? Alcott are one of the world's biggest sustainability project developers. And a project developer in this arena means the organization that goes and works with project owners, projects being the likes of reforestation or afforestation or carbon sequestration through certain land management practices. It might be African cook stoves, or it might be mangrove renewal. Those are the sorts of projects, all of which deliver carbon credits. So the project developer goes and at scale brings projects online, works with the global registration bodies to issue these credits on behalf of the projects. So that's the role that the project developers play. Alcott is one of the biggest in the world, and when the announcement mentioned 500 million tons of carbon credits being brought to the Hedera ecosystem, that's not underplayed. 500 million tons of carbon credits across all of the projects that they're developing over, I don't know what period of time it is, but not long. Bear in mind that a Guardian token, usually one token represents one carbon credit, so 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's 500 million tokens tokenized on the Hedera network. 500 million tokens just with this partnership. So it's a pretty big deal. Hats off. Kudos to Wes for negotiating it. It's been a piece of the puzzle for the whole of the Guardian ecosystem. And as you know, I worked with Wes at the foundation on building these things out, and we always talked about when all the pieces were in place, when the Guardian was in, when the ARM was in, when we had the financing flywheel kind of integrated with all of these things. When we established the digital measurement reporting verification processes, our policies with our open source library, when the friction had been removed from the carbon market ecosystem through these open source technologies that we'd invested in and deployed and started to scale, when that friction had been removed, then we could start pumping it hard and start bringing more and more projects, more and more tokens into the flow. This is the best indicator I've seen yet that is happening right now. So Alcott being brought on board at this point is the indicator. Announced at New York Climate Week, leading into COP28 in Dubai in November. It's doing all the things that we promised would happen right on plan. So 500 million tons of carbon credits means that the system is ready to start pumping these projects through. And that's one project developer. There are many project developers on the planet, and they'll be sitting up and taking notice that this is now a game changer for the whole of the climate space. So well done, Wes.
And all these tokens, in our ecosystem, they aren't all created equal. Some tokens might be created and be worth nothing. We have something like Karate Combat, and those tokens are worth a tenth of a cent. But all of these tokens are going to be worth someplace, between $20 and $40, or I think it was $40 and $80. So there is a significant value to each one of these tokens. Right?
Well, this is a real world asset tokenization use case. And we talk about Guardian, but this is RWA writ large and made real. So, the variance in the price that you just mentioned is actually one of the problems that we're seeking to resolve, because there's no global carbon price until we have Guardian in place, until we have the Totem Earth and the machine learning driven market maker, because the transparency and trust that the Hedera network brings to the carbon marketplaces and biodiversity and all the others, but we're talking about carbon here in particular, drives us towards a global carbon price, which means that disreputable middlemen can't gouge value from those carbon credits. They can't remove the value going back to the projects, because it's all on a public ledger. The balance sheet of the planet is sitting on the public ledger, and that public ledger is Hedera. So, it's just another example that of why Hedera is leading the charge in this particular segment. And like I said, I couldn't be prouder of what the Sustainable Impact team have done.
Well, one more final question. This might be better for the team, and I'll address this with them as well. But, 500 million tons seems like a lot. Are they one of the larger producers, or are there even larger producers out there that we need to target?
Well, then that relates to the projects that Olcott are bringing into the fold. Like I said, there are other project developers that can bring more projects in. We talk about trillions of dollars worth of investment required to scale, significantly by orders of magnitude the number of projects that can come in. So this is just the first step. Olcott is the biggest now, or one of the biggest, but once the funding starts coming in, there is, you can imagine the amount of reforestation that is required to get to net zero, the number of mangroves that need to be re-established, the amount of peatland that needs to be restored. All of these projects are waiting for the financing for that to happen. So I think, yes, 500 million sounds big, but it's, many orders of magnitude below what we could actually achieve.
I think there's a few things to highlight from what Rob said there. First of all is, again, the scale. This is one partnership with 500 million tons of carbon, and that equates to 500 million or more HTS tokens. And now if we look at the traditional carbon market at the moment, we can see that it's worth about $40 to $80 per metric ton of carbon. And the price will differentiate based on sort of the grade or rather the quality of that credit. And as we know, the Hedera Guardian, its value proposition is that it brings on the most trusted, the most transparent, and the highest grade carbon credits because of the things like resolving the issue of double spend. These are real carbon credits that are retired once to drive real world value in terms of helping businesses genuinely offset their emission. And so on the scale of that $40 to $80, you would expect it to be on the higher end because of that value proposition of extra trust, transparency, and so on. You can do the maths there, but that's billions of dollars, multi-billions of dollars coming on to Hedera, coming on chain as real world assets representing these carbon emissions, or these carbon offsets rather. So not only have we got Aberdeen tokenizing their sterling fund, not only have we got the likes of DLA Piper and Toko and Red Swan and beyond, but we now also have real world assets coming on chain in the form of millions, hundreds of millions of carbon credits. Now, I think the second thing to highlight is the network effects, or at least the business development leverage that a partnership like this can have. When we look at sort of the NFT side of things, perhaps the consumer engagement or the gaming, we see projects like Polygon really snapping up some of the big deals, with Nike and Adidas and these kind of different brands. And to me, that really is because they got that sort of flagship first brand. And so in this case here, I think we have or really are, positioning ourselves as the home of these climate markets, as the home of regenerative finance, and having this massive flagship use case now, like 500 million metric tons of carbon coming on board, I think is acting as our kind of Nike equivalent for Polygon. This is the use case that will get us in the door with, the likes of Sphera and Gold Standard, of course, the global carbon registries that we're already, in conversation with. This is beyond speculation. This is beyond a vision. This is genuinely 500 million carbon credits coming on chain from one of the biggest carbon project developers in the world. But I think one thing it also reflects on is what Rob said about all this money that's on the sideline. There's all this money on the sideline that's willing to come in, but it's waiting to come into a new climate market whereby everything is auditable, everything is trustworthy, transparent, resolving that original Microsoft issue, which was Microsoft wanting to offset their carbon and finding out that the markets just weren't in a position of trust to enable that. By bringing this project developer on board, by opening the books on climate finance is the slogan that came out with the press release, i.e. showing an exact overview of the financial flows within these markets, where they're going, who's getting paid what's happening on chain, fully auditably now. I think that is the green flag for this other capital to come in. Once this has been proven, again, we're in the early days, but once these are on chain, I think next 3 or 4 months is the target there. That is, I think, going to be the green flag for, all this extra liquidity that has been waiting for a trusted market. So really there, one partnership all got 500 million carbon credits, an access pool, I think now to the business development side with Sphera Gold Standard, and then also the green flag for extra liquidity. So there's 3 massive things that I think have come from this partnership. Rob highlighted them amazingly. And then, of course, hats off to Wes and the Sustainable Impact team for making that happen. And, it really feels like the wind couldn't be more in the sails of the team over there at the moment.
Well, Wes is being so strategic about all this. You talk about the registries, and there's a brand new registry in APAC that's going to be created. We covered them a while back in Carbon Base, but we're getting the marketplaces. We've got the infrastructure with the Guardian, and it just continues on here. Now we're getting some supply. One thing I do want to say is every single time we cover our refi ecosystem, I'll get some pushback from somebody online about the validity of climate change and things along those lines. Now, I understand you want to be skeptical. We have a lot of skeptical people in the crypto industry, so that's understandable. And I'm not a climate scientist, so I'm not going to make a judgment on that. But I will say that I have drilled down into the things that are being facilitated by our refi ecosystem. Whether it's reforestation, restoration of mangroves, as Rob mentioned, the installation of solar panels or other renewable energy, lowering our energy costs, certainly really important right now. These things are unequivocally good. If we can get corporations to bankroll these projects, it's fantastic. If it's built on Hedera, even better. And that's what this show, of course, is all about. So if there is anything that's built in the Hedera ecosystem, we're going to cover it on here. And I'm sure we're going to be covering a lot more in the refi ecosystem because Hedera really has taken point in that space. But there's a new initiative in that space called DLT Earth. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so, DLT Earth really is regenerative finance, or refi rather, in its truest form. And so it's a new partnership between the DLT Science Foundation, which was set up by Paolo Tusco of UCL, governing council member, co-founder of Quant, massive extensive history within cryptography. So the DSF, the Sustainable Impact Fund at the HBAR Foundation, the West African Alliance, who are doing a lot in carbon credit and climate markets, Allcott, who have the onboard of these 500 million carbon credits, then Envision Blockchain, who manage the Guardian itself. So this is a global refi or global regenerative finance grant program with the funding of a hackathon that fits within the 5 core investment thesis of the SIF, which is their overarching strategy that we're seeing come to fruition in sort of real time. This hackathon is one of the first things which is going to be turbocharged by, the industry contacts rather of the DLT Science Foundation, which, these massive pools of PhD students and all of their own industry contacts that come from that, but also Alcott is one of the largest carbon project developers in the world. So I can really expect that we're going to have some really strong participants in this hackathon. It'll additionally fund 5 fellowships in the Global South to support cutting-edge research in sustainability and climate projects, and again, tied to the methodologies that underpin The Guardian, but also the 5 core investment principles of the HBAR Foundation Sustainable Impact Fund. So really, this is not only helping the vision in the Global South by sort of investing there, but also by helping the people on their ground at universities, really getting that sort of grassroots investment, grassroots support, so that these people in these communities can really sort of bolster those regions themselves and really help turbocharge sort of innovation in those regions so that they can truly fulfill the vision of regenerative finance from the actual Global South itself, rather than having Western input doing it all the time as well. This is real grassroots innovation. So really excited to see that refi in its truest form. And of course, that builds on the previous Alcott partnership. And so a lot of synergies there with this new relationship with Alcott for sure.
Sure, and we talk about the Guardian ecosystem over and over again, and the creators of the Guardian is Envision Blockchain. I caught up with Daniel Norkin, he is the CEO of Envision Blockchain, to talk about the ServiceNow application that was just launched utilizing that tech. So listen in. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the Guardian ecosystem. But Daniel, can you explain the ServiceNow application that was launched just last week and what they're trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, so the ServiceNow app that's live in the ServiceNow marketplace, which is pretty cool to see, to be honest. What they're trying to achieve is really what we had set out for in the very beginning when we were creating the Guardian. Again, just as a reminder for those that may not know what the Guardian is, we open sourced it together with the HBAR Foundation and Swirls Lab back in October 2021. Actually, was the first release, and we wanted to empower standard registries and project developers and project proponents in the carbon market industry to be able to create methodologies of their choice, or maybe even choose from a list of open source methodologies, and be able to create real world digital assets. In this case, it's environmental assets. So again, what ServiceNow is doing is they deployed an app in their marketplace for the renewable energy credit market. So for any ServiceNow customer that wants to issue renewable energy credits, they can do so based on a methodology that ServiceNow deemed appropriate. It's actually based off of the open source methodology that we, Envision Blockchain, first developed and put out there. Some of the first iterations with the Guardian. It's based on the International Renewable Energy Credit Standard. So yeah, super happy to see ServiceNow again empowering the businesses that want to be able to purchase renewable energy credits.
Now, we know that ServiceNow has some of the biggest companies in the world as customers, but who are the targeted users of the app? And can you give us any names of potential customers that might be interested?
Sure. So I'm not sure if I'm able to say specific names. I know that everybody always wants to see the names. There's a pretty big pilot which is happening right now, and I don't know officially, but probably by COP28, there's going to be a whole series of announcements, which is not that far. Probably at the end of November, early December is when the conference is going to be. But I could tell you that there's a large pilot going on with a company that's providing solar panels, along with a very large telecommunication company. So probably I'm giving more than I can, but just for the sake of being able to say something that is backed by what's actually happening. So very large telecommunication company is looking at creating renewable energy credits from a company that's providing solar panels. The company that's providing solar panels, just to kind of give an idea of how things are working in the pilot, is that they're a customer of ServiceNow. And they're going to be using the application, again, like I said earlier, to be able to deploy this open source methodology that's based on the IREC standard. So they're acting as a standard registry, if you will, issuing the credits to their customers. And again, one of their customers is this large telecommunication company.
Oh, that's exciting to hear. I know giving specific names can be tough at times, but we'll find out in due time.
It's coming.
So it seems like the Guardian ecosystem is getting all the parts and pieces in place that needs to happen. Are there any other DLT refi ecosystems on other networks that are on par with and can compete with what's been created on top of Hedera?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the best way to look at it is the Guardian and the Guardian community, Envision Blockchain, and the others that are in the space. We're doing it a little bit differently than what the other refi ecosystems are doing, right? So obviously, the other refi ecosystems are leveraging the power that DLT has with regards to immutability. We're doing it on top of Hedera, obviously, for the use of their Hedera topics, which is a really great way to organize information, make it searchable. The ledger itself is immutable. You know, everyone knows about the Hedera high throughput. That's all good. But as far as the features are concerned, we're doing it a little bit differently, to my understanding. Other refi applications, if you will, that are across different ecosystems and different networks, they have a specific business model, which is different than the business model that the Guardian provides. So again, what the Guardian is providing is the ability to have this massive open source library of different methodologies that exist. I know that there's a goal to have the largest open source methodology that exists. I think that the number is somewhere around 300, and we are getting pretty close to that number. The reason for that is because we don't want to push a specific standard down the throats of the users. We believe that there's a free market. We believe that there should be the ability for project developers to be able to choose which methodology best fits their actions. And the buyers, more specifically, the buyers of these offsets should be able to purchase an offset that they can verify, that they can trust, again, by the use of the DLT that we have here in Hedera. But they should be able to choose what they want based on the actual attributes, not based on a specific brand name that's in the industry. So we're really trying to promote the free market. We're really trying to promote, open source, where, again, just to be more specific, others in the space, they have a similar image in providing DLT and providing offsets, but they're a very specific methodologies, if you will, that is not necessarily catering to the free market.
Well, it sounds like you have a really sound strategy there. What can we expect from the Guardian ecosystem within the next few years?
It's a good question. It's something that we're always pondering, and while there's no right answer, because literally, if you take a look at the roadmap that we have, we take it about 6 months at a time because the industry is shifting like crazy. Mm-hmm. What we thought was going to be 2 years ago is not the same as what it is now. So it's kind of hard to say that far into the future. But I could tell you that we're looking at the voluntary carbon market in the near term, right? Because it's not a regulated market just yet. I think that it's important to make sure that for features specific within the Guardian, we are like constantly aiming to make it easier for policy developers to be able to create policies at ease. I think that we've done a good job of taking what takes months down to a couple weeks. I know that our team at Envision can design and develop a policy or a methodology, is what we call it, a digital MRV. We've taken it down to about a couple weeks, taken in terms of designing and building. And I think that the tools that we have on our roadmap allow for, in the future, anyone that can draw lines on PowerPoint or put something into an Excel spreadsheet to be able to create policies, which again fosters the ability to have this largest open source methodology that exists within refi. We're really trying to cater to the policy creators.
Well, Daniel, congratulations on the success we've seen come out of the Guardian thus far, but I really do think this is just the beginning.
Brandon, really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much and appreciate the kind words.
So, I mean, obviously, massive week for refi and sustainability this week, is again highlighted by that ServiceNow integration. So, lastly, before we move on from the SIF, one last thing, which was the contribution of the HBAR Foundation sustainability team to the Biodiversity Credit Alliance, which was set up by the UN to basically realize the biodiversity framework of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was what they massive mouthful, but what they established at COP15. And so it's great to know that, of course, the UN, the COP, massive contributors to this kind of refi sustainability market narrative, building on the work of the Paris agreements, again, having the foundation at the centerpiece of that, where they're building these frameworks, where they're having these discussions. To have Hedera there, to have the SIF there, is again part of this strategy, and great work again to the SIF team.
And we're going to move from refi into tradfi. Now, of course, there's a lot of overlap there, but Zenobia did a great job catching up with Scott Teal from Toko, getting an update from that team, and there's some really interesting stuff going on. I grabbed a few highlights from it, but you certainly need to go watch the whole thing, but here are the highlights.
So we've really moved into a phase of delivery. There was a lot of building the original tokenization capability in the original engine, and then we've moved into real world applications in terms of working with asset owners and issuers who are now trying to actually bring to life this future of finance we've all been talking about and been promised for so long. And real estate's an interesting example because it has a habit of sitting on a land registry that's typically a government-controlled thing, and land registries around the world are all different with their different rules. So, yeah, it's complex because how do you now go about interacting with what in some cases are very legacy systems that have a particular way of working, and now we're throwing together entirely new products that are all being digitized and capable of moving around on blockchains. Land registries weren't built with that in mind. That intersection of the old and new, and we're seeing this in the funds industry as well, where some of the traditional roles that exist, the third-party transfer agent, the trusted third party that needs to keep a record of who owns things. Well, hang on, that's what blockchains do. They do an exceptional job of keeping a record of who owns what. And so you've got entire industries that are now potentially, what is their role going forward? And so, yeah, there's disruption, there's opportunity in that disruption. But you're right, asset by asset, sort of regulator by regulator, and country by country, they're all unique problems to be solved. VARA is the regulator you all wish you had in your country when it comes to virtual assets. They're a regulatory startup, if you can imagine such a thing. So they created a brand new regulatory authority here in Dubai, where Toko has now been expanded into, and much of our team, including myself, are now headquartered. And VARA regulate all virtual assets. So unlike, for example, in the US, where there's this great debate about which one fits into which regulator and what rules, and regulators all fighting about it, and the industry sitting in the dark wondering who they're going to upset and whose rules they should be following. So VARA came out and said, well, we're going to regulate all of them. It doesn't matter whether you're a crypto or an NFT or a digitized commodity or a payment coin or a utility coin or a digitized security. If you're a bundle of rights sitting in a token deployed on some sort of distributed ledger technology, then you are a virtual asset. And if you want to provide services around virtual assets, then you need a license. And the good news is we are we are the license provider. We are your regulator. These are the set of rules. So there's complete clarity now. Now it's not an easy set of rules, but we know which ones apply. There's now no doubt. So the effort can be then put into focusing on how to actually deploy projects and put assets on chain. So that's really the difference with VARA. And we're very excited to get the first full market license. Now this is a game changer. Full market is there are different license categories. We're the first to get a full market exchange and brokerage license. The full market allows us to distribute digitized securities to retail investors without a 1-year lockup, without the kind of additional disclosures and registrations that you would need. And again, it's kind of heresy when it comes to traditional financial services, where people that fall into that retail camp need to be treated very differently. They're not allowed access to these products. Heaven forbid, people without much money get access to high yield products. And I get there are reasons for this, but in reality, what we see with blockchain is the promise of democratization of finance. Well, how can you democratize finance if you don't let people play? And so again, this is a really fundamental shift where they've gone, well, we are going to allow people to play. There are guardrails, there are rules, there are disclosure requirements, there are, all the sorts of things you would expect from a proper regime. But it doesn't start with the premise that retail may not play. And so that's a really interesting point, and it leads into some of the projects that we're now about to launch. So Virtuzone are the Middle East's largest corporate services company. So they provide assistance with incorporation, visas, payroll, all of the kind of support services that particularly smaller and medium-sized businesses require. So they have, I think something like 5,000 or 6,000 businesses that they're supporting in terms of that function. The number one thing that all of their companies say is challenging, and this is not news for early stage companies, is access to capital. How do I go and do fundraising? And the world has ways of doing it. There are crowdfunding rules and ways of doing crowdfunding. Actually, the US has a reasonably good crowdfunding regime with reasonably high ceilings, but actually in many parts of the world, it's pretty restrictive as to how many investors you can onboard, how much you can raise, the requirements around registration of these certificates. So in practice, it's not actually that easy. But again, once you tokenize an equity, and so that's what we're going to do with them, we're going to take equity of these companies, we're going to tokenize it, create a digital representation of the shares, and then we're going to sell the shares in a primary market issuance in the form of fundraising. And provided we structure it correctly, there are no restrictions around how many investors, what type of investors, back to that retail point. And so you've suddenly got a situation where not only these companies that are promising have a way of promoting and raising capital in a similar way to how people can do it with an IPO, but an IPO is designed for very large companies at a much later stage. So this is going to provide some of that access to capital raising to earlier stage companies. On the flip side, how do you find an interesting private equity company to invest in today? It's really hard, it's
right.
Word of mouth.
You have to know someone or be connected,
exactly, and then you have
go
to
to
get
the right school.
time, and it's luck, and there's no, how do I find out information about them? So it's a two-sided problem, and in some respects, people say, well, we've already got the stock market, and that does the big stuff, and it's like, yeah, but private equity is 6-7 times bigger than public equity, so it's a much bigger market by value, and obviously far bigger in terms of volume of entities. Now it's a different risk profile and everything else, but this is the promise of what can now be done is we tokenize this equity, we can put it on a platform, the companies can advertise, people can come and look, they'll be able to find these companies. There's the endorsement of having, being part of and being supported by not only by Toko, but by Virtuzone, who are working with them and providing corporate services. So there's almost a credibility built into that structure because we'll only onboard companies of a certain caliber. And I think that's going to be really interesting. Now, what's the market going to say about that? We'll wait and see, but I'm pretty confident people will be really interested. And because of the way Toko works, where we put the deal in the token, lots of information about these companies, they're all of the legal documents, they'll all be hashed, embedded, financials. So it's kind of like the Toko minted tokens become the living data room. It's there and it's accessible through the token to a whitelisted investor who's done the AML KYC. And so it's automating all of that very manual process of private equity that happens today.
And Zeb, of course, the Middle Eastern region is doing amazing things in the crypto space for all the reasons that Scott was explaining there. But Hashpack and Sphera World are doing some interesting things there as well. Can you explain that?
Sure. So, as we know, in the UAE, they're really going all in on what are sort of traditionally Western sport. Things like football, things like golf, things like Formula One. They really want to position themselves as a hub for this entertainment industry. And so Sphera World are partnered with Kura, and Kura is the biggest sports online website for the MENA region. It's something like 30 to 40 million unique monthly active users. So Sphera, Kura, and DECA4, who are one of the advisory firms that we've worked with a lot on various projects, they've partnered with Hashpack to create an NFT marketplace and launchpad for their 30 to 40 million monthly users. So, I think to have Hashpack, which is, of course, sort of the heart of the NFT community, leading this initiative with Sphera, they know how the NFT community operates. They know their particular needs and UX needs. And to have them working on this scale is, of course, a testament to the team there, testament to the capabilities of Hedera, but also, I think, a massive green flag for a massively growing industry in Dubai, and the UAE rather. And to have them working hand in hand with Hedera on that is really exciting. And if we can even capture, 5% of those users, that would be extraordinary. So exciting times for Hashpack for sure, and for all of us.
And sticking with the sporting world, I know that Karate Combat is trying to get in touch with Sphera World as well. So I'm sure there's going to be some collaborations. I also saw that they're reaching out to the fans there in the MENA region. And they also, sticking again with Karate Combat, they got another mention on Joe Rogan's podcast. So again, Karate Combat is doing an excellent job. We're going to make a hard left turn here from sports into travel. But I guess considering we were talking about the Middle Eastern region, if any of us want to see all the cool stuff that's going on there, we're going to need to travel. But can you tell us about XeniPay and what they're doing with BitPay?
Yeah, so XeniPay are a sort of white label travel platform or e-commerce platform for travel experiences. So any company can sort of license this white label from them and tailor it to their own individual needs. And so BitTravel, which is created by BitPay, is their own kind of travel e-commerce website for crypto payments and so on, powered by Xeni, and then of course built on Hedera. That's the Hedera token service, the Hedera consensus service. Not sure about the smart contract service, but I know for a fact the HCS and HTS are both used there. And so that's an initial massive one, of course. BitPay are a big organization in themselves within crypto. But alongside that BitPay travel announcement, that's not it. They've also worked with Yearbook Canvas, who are India's leading yearbook merchandise and community platform, to launch a new travel site for India's top higher educational institutions. And through this travel website, they get discounts on, flights, hotels, this kind of stuff. And again, powered by Xeni and built on Hedera. So really excited to see that sort of intersection of flights, travel experiences in crypto. And of course, seeing that Xeni is being white labeled this much is a testament to their products. And then again, a testament to Hedera. When you see an initial product like Xeni get picked up, get its first white label from something like BitPay Travel, it really gives them that kind of momentum to go to other partners and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we can facilitate, and so on. And this is what Calaxy also has. People don't realize that Calaxy app is a single application within the Calaxy protocol or the Creators Galaxy protocol. So people can go to Calaxy, white label something like Calaxy app and tailor it for their own specific needs on top of the Calaxy protocol. So using things like the creators token ecosystem that they've built, which is of course built on Hedera. So, if you are a developer, if you're an open source developer, whatever it is, you can go to Calaxy, you can go to their protocol and make your own white label solution using the product they've already got. So, for instance, you look at, something like OnlyFans, you look at these, creator platforms. Perhaps for the more adult entertainment side of the industry, someone could take something like Calaxy, take the white label that product, and then apply it to something like a Web3 OnlyFans or whatever it is. So there's a lot of infrastructure within the Hedera community, within the Hedera ecosystem, that can be sort of picked up like this and taken in other directions, tailored to specific needs. And Xeni is the first one to be realizing this, but I really think that Calaxy will also be in that position in the future.
Yeah, well, speaking of Calaxy, go check out my feed on Calaxy because I have something about Hello Future Live there. Of course, that's going to be the big meetup, the conference, the first Hedera conference in a long time. I know they had some hackathons they did in person early on, but this is the first real community-driven meetup like this, certainly on this scale. But go check out my Calaxy feed. That's HBAR Bull to get a discount code for tickets if you are out there in California or if you're fairly close and can make a quick flight in. Certainly check that out, and we'll get you some discounts on those tickets. In addition, there are some huge things that are going on. There's going to be all kinds of music, a lot of it coming from the Siki team, who of course is building music applications on Hedera, but they're bringing in Scott Page. He's from one of my favorite bands ever, Pink Floyd. I remember listening to them all the way back. I remember one of my teachers took me to a Pink Floyd concert when I was in 7th grade. So I'm a huge fan of Pink Floyd, and I'm really excited to meet Scott. Did you catch that one, Zep?
Definitely. That's really exciting to see Scott Page there. And also be working with Siki, which is another one of our ecosystem applications, and then be at Hello Future Live. So it's a real coming together, I think, of two big components of our ecosystem, then a big player in the traditional music industry. And hopefully he'll meet some of the other people in the ecosystem and some new relationships will be forged there.
I think it's going to be a great opportunity to network for all of our smaller applications. You have the Google council member meeting, and there was tons of networking going on there. This is going to be the networking for some of our smaller applications, and I'm looking forward to that. Of course, I'm going to be representing Twigital there. I'm going to have my HBAR bull hat on. I'm also going to be representing the HBAR Foundation, so it's just going to be a blast all around. All right, so with all of that out of the way, I'd like to finish up with Shark Bites. We got some really good community questions this week, and as always, Rob did a great job in responding, so listen in. Welcome back, Rob. Where are you calling from?
Hey, Brandon. I'm in beautiful Italy this week, and then I'm heading up to Zurich to spend some time with the Hashgraph Association team next week.
You've got it rough. You know, I'm traveling, of course, for Hedera as well, going down to the Dominican Republic. We had a blast down there at Karate Combat. I'm going to be going next week, of course, to Hella Future Live. But, Rob, I am pretty envious of some of the places that you get to go. But with that, we'll go ahead and jump into them. The first question comes from the community. It comes from Matt Joyce. He asked, what did Rob mean by legal finality as a unique feature? I know Hedera provides strong guarantees around finality, and many networks don't even achieve finality. But for the ones which do claim some form of finality, does it not meet some legal standard?
Yeah, well done for picking up on that. I think I only mentioned it once. So legal finality is a phrase that we've been using with some of our partners, and in particular in the payments or stablecoin space. Now, as we know, we achieve settlement finality within a few seconds. And as we know, we have this thing called asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance, which demonstrates that the Hedera network settles with absolute finality, unlike blockchains that will never achieve that level of absolute settlement finality, because a blockchain will always have the chance of being rolled back, and that's a function of the governance of that network. So even though it is really, really unlikely that Bitcoin, for example, would ever roll back or be pruned in such a way that once committed, those blocks would be removed and forked.
But that has happened in the past with a lot of controversy, right? With
Absolutely.
Ethereum and Ethereum Classic.
Absolutely. So there's a very small chance that it can happen, but it's only practically Byzantine fault tolerant. And the more blocks that go onto the end of the chain, the less likely it is, but it's never going to be 100% final. With a hash graph, that isn't the case. We can only go forwards. We can never go backwards. Every event is after every other event. And so that absolute settlement finality, when you look at it from a legal context, and this has to be the case when we're talking about payments and the transfer of value, and is forgotten on the other blockchains. 99.9% is maybe okay in terms of settlement finality for an NFT or a reward point or some other token. But if you're talking about large denominations in stablecoins, you want absolute legal finality. And by that we mean if you go to a court of law and show that a transaction has occurred, then you need to absolutely be able to stand behind the fact that that transaction was between those parties and couldn't have been double spent. So that's what we mean by legal finality. It has meaning in certain contexts, certainly within banks, and we use it sparingly, but it's a term that we bring out from time to time.
So, okay, I'm going to press you a little bit more on this. There are networks like Phantom, which may have taken the hash graph themselves and modified it a bit, or companies like, or chains like IOTA, things along those lines that claim to have some kind of finality. Why couldn't they claim the same kind of legal finality?
Well, I mean, I can't talk to those data structures. I don't know enough about them. But our superpower, as I've often said, is our governing council. So the trust that comes with the network, both at a technical level and at a governing level, is what protects the network and ensures that it doesn't roll back, or you can't get certain parties colluding against the network. So it's another level of protection, which Phantom and the others I don't think can say. So When we talk about legal finality, it's at the technical level, really. But the additional governance that the Governing Council provides kind of really reinforces that too. And as I've often said, opens doors and makes the conversations with enterprises very easy when you just point to the Governing Council and say, well, all these organizations are supporting and hosting this and owning this network at this stage in its maturity.
Once again, it comes down to trust, the trust layer of the internet, as we often say.
100%.
All right, so the next one we have comes from Lewis, and he asks, the Stablecoin Studio chose not to integrate Oracle services of Chainlink, Best in Class, and Hedera Council. Now Sergey and Nigel are promoting use cases at Sybos. Will rising tide lift all Governing Council boats? Your strategy disappointment and strategy suggestion.
Okay, a loaded question. So firstly, Stablecoin Studio did not choose any integrations, actually. The integrations that we have launched with were the first, cabs off the rank. That's not to say that Chainlink wouldn't be an integration and we're not actually working with them. That may or may not be the case. So Chainlink are considered to be best in class, of course, as an Oracle, but the Axiom Pro Oracle that we've launched as proof of reserve with WorldPay, another Governing Council member, is equally appropriate, if not more so, because it's Hedera native. So, I wouldn't read anything into the fact that Chainlink weren't one of the first cabs off the rank. They've got a big backlog of work, and we were moving pretty quickly in terms of bringing Stablecoin Studio to market. So don't read anything into that. The Sergey and Nigel referred to in the question are Sergey, the CEO of Chainlink, and Nigel Dobson from ANZ. And they've recently collaborated on a project that they were talking about at Sybos. So, the question refers to something which is totally unrelated to Stablecoin Studio. All the banks we're working with are very, very interested in the Stablecoin Studio technology stack, and many of them are moving in the direction of my program. So, that may or may not accelerate Chainlink's interest in integrating themselves into the Stablecoin Studio. We don't need them to do that, because that layer of services around it, the custody provider, the proofs of reserve and oracles, fraud management and regulatory reporting, audit and token management are a service layer that use the Stablecoin Studio rather than Stablecoin Studio being hardwired into those services. So it goes the other way. My strategy disappointment, I'm never disappointed by strategy. Strategy by its very nature is changeable and it's kind of far thinking. So I think our strategy for Hedera more widely is spot on in terms of the three pillars of sustainability, on-chain finance and customer engagement, because that's broad enough to cover most of the use cases we're seeing. As I've often said, I think there's a fourth pillar, which is Industry 4.0, which I'm seeing now emerging. Now a lot of the initial use cases are bedding in and actually being brought to market. And often you have these, the need to see or touch or demonstrate those simple use cases before you can ideate around the more complex ones, which bring with Industry 4.0. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think it does, and I mean, when we're having as much success as we're seeing, I don't think there's too much room for disappointment in general. All right, so the next one we have is from Celestial Being, one of my favorite community members, always really engaged.
Absolutely.
He asked, what are venture firms or hedge funds mainly looking for to invest in crypto like Hedera, and how can we highlight our network to these companies?
I think the question presupposes that venture firms and funds are not being drawn to Hedera. I don't believe that's the case. I talk to a lot of venture firms with portfolios that are investing in some of our ecosystem builders. At the Hashgraph Association, we work quite closely with funds to, through our accelerator programs. And I know the foundation, when I was driving accelerators, some of those accelerators have an outcome which was introduction of those startups to venture firms and investors. So as Hedera grows, as the Hedera brand becomes more widely known, and the Token 2049 experience and some of the other conferences over the last few weeks, I think have reinforced that in all our minds. The people are coming to our booths and saying, we know Hedera, tell us more about the use cases rather than what's Hedera. So that is changing as well, and the same is the case with the venture funds, the investors. Impact funds as well. Impact funds are very focused on our Guardian ecosystem and our sustainability use cases and how they can provide liquidity and capital into the flywheel which drives the project development. Celestial being, you've got everything to be excited about new capital flowing in. Of course, we're in a bear market. Of course, AI is attracting a lot of the attention because it's in that frothy phase of frothy, noisy, capital attracting phase. But I'm pretty confident that as our bear market turns into an upswing, the builders that have found product market fit have ticked off all the things that the fund managers are looking for, will be very, very well placed to come out of their startup phase and go into their scale up phase and move with the cycle as it swings up.
And Rob, I know when we talk about bear market, people are thinking about Bitcoin price and Ethereum price and the crypto token prices. But we're in kind of a little bit of a hangover in the venture capital space in general. But these things move in phases as well. We're going through kind of a dry spell in that venture capital space now. But that's going to ebb and flow just like everything else. And we're going to have exciting times in the future, especially once some of these use cases start to really come to fruition and catch traction in our space.
Yeah, I think, and more so, this isn't about crypto, this is about Web3. This is about a transition, a fundamental transition of the way that businesses operate, commerce operates online. And the picks and shovels phase is where we are. There are solutions, emerging complex solutions that we talk about all the time, which will attract quite a lot of capital, I suspect. There's a lot of capital that's just being held back. And I think quite rightly, because the projects, the businesses that emerge from this phase are going to be really hardened. They really will have proven themselves and be incredibly investable. So, those are still here in however long it is, 6 months, 9 months, hopefully less, probably a little bit more, will attract, I suspect, quite a lot of attention from the venture capitalists and investors.
All good points. All right, so the next one comes from Ballers, and I'll take this initially, and then you can put in your 2 cents as well. But he asked, is there any way to have someone in the Hedera team quantify what these live projects will attribute to the value of Hedera, what their potential revenue in terms of transactions, etc. So to start off, of course, this calculus is done whenever entities in our ecosystem look at different projects. They take a look and try to figure out how many transactions could this add to our network. What are those transactions? Is it an HCS transaction with 1/100th of a cent? Is it an HTS transaction that's 1/10th of a cent? Or account creations or smart contract calls, which are 5 cents. So those are fairly high value. But those are wild guesses. That they're trying to figure out what the product market fit is and what kind of demand there is. We're seeing things like Karate Combat, and it's always good when you see those kind of metrics highlighted by different entities that are doing these projects, but we really don't know, especially early on. But then you have the aspect of, again, with Karate Combat, you'll look at the transactions from somebody going on Saucer Swap and buying one of those tokens. Does that get attributed to Hashpack because they're helping facilitate it? Is it Saucer Swap because, again, they're helping facilitate that transaction? Or is it Karate Combat that created the token and is creating the demand? You can take a look at the same thing. We're going to be talking, of course, about Alcott. That's one of the big news stories this week, the tokenization of carbon credits. Once those markets start to build, is the credit going to the market itself? Is it going to Alcott for creating those tokens? Is it the infrastructure that's under it? Is it the mirror nodes or the Guardian, things along those lines? The other calculus that has to take place is, how does this fit into our broader strategy? You mentioned the 3 different verticals that we're focusing on. Does it fit into a larger strategy that will cause things to go exponential? In the prior example I used of Karate Combat and DeFi, that might be a linear growth, and this is all hypothetical. Maybe in the refi ecosystem, you could have that go more vertical or more exponential, because we see high frequency trading as traditional finance moves into that space. We really don't know where those killer apps are going to come from. It might be something like Neuron and our Internet of Things, but we have to try to seed all these different things all at once to see what's going to work over time. But Rob, do you have any general thoughts on these kind of things? I think we try to give everybody the tools to make this own calculus on their own. We try to do these shows and tell everybody everything that's going on. They can kind of do their own calculus and come to these conclusions on their own. But what are your thoughts on this in general, coming from the Hashgraph Association?
So I think this question's probably digging a little bit deeper and looking for a little bit of alpha on this, which obviously I can't provide, although I'd love to. But it's probably worth explaining a little bit how the foundation and the association provides grants, and the grants that are deployed are related to effectively an agreement for not only delivery but a forecast of growth, and the KPIs that both of those organizations are given by Hedera are the ones we talk about, and that you just mentioned. So transaction per second, total value locked, active accounts, as quite crude measures, but you can get quite nuanced in within that as well, because as you rightly say, there are different revenue models based on different types of network services being used, which align with different types of use case. So when a grant is given, certainly now, after a year or two of maturity in these processes, the grant needs some kind of return on that investment, and the ROI isn't financial, it's actually related to those KPIs. So if you then line up all of the grants against the forecasts, against those metrics over time, you can aggregate some kind of, smart people do modeling on these things. And within tolerances, you can kind of predict what those growths of the network services are, and then extrapolate that to network revenue. And we do that with the association. The foundation does that too. Some grants even reward that growth, so which I think is an excellent model, because the grantees are then incentivized not only to deliver that product on Hedera, but also grow the product, because they their skin in the game, their rewards are related to the foundation's rewards, and then ultimately all rolled up to Hedera and the wider ecosystem. Now that isn't made transparent yet. The foundation, the association aren't required to publish that level of detail, but I suspect at some point in the future, maybe obfuscated data will be made available, and you can see how well those organizations have actually been performing, because it's we only see it after the fact, and we only see it once it's delivered, and then the growth will be might be slow, it might be exponential, but in aggregate over time I think it'll be significant.
I want to make sure to thank everybody who asked the questions. Keep dropping your questions down there in the comments for Rob. Thank you for your answers here today, Rob, and we'll see you next week.
My pleasure. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Brent.
All right, Zep, so I say it a lot. We're getting a lot more things that we can get our hands on, and that's going to accelerate as we start to have our games coming out. And Vavel just had an announcement this week. They're one of our gaming applications that are going to be launched on Hedera. Do you have any information on that one?
Yeah, so today is the launch of their closed alpha. So if you're in the Discord, I believe you can get sort of early access to the game, work out how the NFTs on the token service are interacting there, get a feel from the game, and so on and so forth. So I think this is actually one of our first, larger scale games that has actually gone live. We've spoken about a lot of them for a long time, but this is a really exciting time for people in the Hedera community to see and feel what gaming on Hedera might be like. So if you're interested in that, join the Vavel Games Discord, which you can find on their Twitter page.
And sticking with the games, we also had Legends of the Past. They had their first character drop this week, and they've sold out. So congratulations to Legends of the Past. Great execution on that. I also caught Earthlings put out some more footage. Their stuff is always so beautiful, and they are so engaged. Somehow, they're managing to get somebody to Hello Future Live, considering their team is over there in Europe. They're still going to have some representation there at Hello Future Live. But again, it's one of the teams that seems to have fallen in love with the Hedera community and just stays engaged continuously. So keep coming out with that great footage, and we'll keep highlighting it here on this show. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some network analysis. All right, so transaction volume is remaining down. I know I thought it was going to bounce back up a little bit more quickly. We are averaging about 90 transactions per second, which is higher than most of the networks out there, but still it's something that I want to get addressed. So I'm going to try to dig into it, figure out exactly what Atmio is doing and when we might expect the volume to shoot back up. When it does go back up, I do expect it to be really high. But over the past 24 hours, we've had over 8 million transactions with a max TPS of about 700. Time to consensus is certainly a bright spot at 3.6 seconds. Account growth has remained strong with over 12,000 created this week and over 31,000 active accounts. Taking a look at the fungible tokens, we have Zero, Palamenta, which I'm not sure what that one is, so I'm going to have to follow up. We have Energy Trade Token, Wrapped HBAR, Sauce, Dovu, Not a Protocol, USDC, Karate, and Coffee Che, another one that I'm not sure of, rounding out the top 10. And moving down to our NFTs, we have Road Code, we have 3 Earthlings NFTs, 2 Karateka NFTs, The Naming Service, Hangry Barboons, and Legends Aspirant rounding out that top 10. And that Legends of the Past NFT, Clio, did make it into the top 10 over the past 24 hours, but not into the past week, so that's why you didn't see it up there. But with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some DeFi. Total value locked on Hedera, not including state or liquid staking, stands at $31 million. 27 of that coming from Saucer Swap and just under 4 million on HeliSwap. Taking a look at the returns on some of Saucer Swap's popular trading pairs, HBAR HBAR-X is just under 6%, 24% on HBAR Sauce, 26% on HBAR USDC, and HBAR Karate has dropped significantly to 17%. On HeliSwap, we have 4% on HBAR HBAR-X, 78% on HBAR Heli, 23% on HBAR USDC, and a nice return on HBAR Karate of 47%. All the more impressive because unlike Saucer Swap, HeliSwap doesn't include LP rewards in those numbers. Taking a look at the HBAR and crypto markets, Bitcoin is pretty much flat on the week, and HBAR has generally underperformed alts this week, being down slightly to between 4.9 and 5 cents, where it spent most of the week. It still looks like we're bouncing along support in that zone, but losing 4.9 cents could cause a drop. ETH has performed well on strong rumors of a futures ETF. Looking into the future, I have no doubt HBAR will eventually be included in ETFs, as it's not going anywhere in the crypto space, which is really establishing itself as an asset class. It's just a matter of time. Granted, it could be a long time. Now, obviously, we lost Zep here, but I'm sure he would have focused on ReFi. I really do think ReFi is going to be a killer app in all of crypto, and with Hedera taking that pole position, we're in a really good spot. All right, so next week, we're going to have Alcott. I'm going to get them on for an exclusive interview, so we're going to get some more information around that. Of course, Hello Future Live is going to be the big buzz for next week. I'm going to have a Twitter space going through the schedule next Tuesday, so that should be fun. And then, of course, we should be creating some content at the actual event starting Friday night and going through the entire weekend. With that all out of the way, we'll see you next week.